So, hi, Ross. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
You're
Thanks for having
releasing,
us, obviously.
no worries. You're releasing your new album, Virus, in a month or so. How are you feeling about the upcoming release?
Oh, yeah, ecstatic. We've been sitting on this material for a little while, and it's really rewarding to finally release it to the public. So yeah, we're over the moon. That we're obviously Virus is actually sort of a companion piece to Vector. So being able to kind of reveal the second part, as it were, to everyone is a really cool thing. And hopefully the penny is going to drop with a lot of people now who might have been expecting more from Vector. They have now the complete work. So yeah, it's really, really exciting times.
Yeah, I think most people, myself included, were actually surprised about the news about Virus because you kind of kept quiet about the release, and you also were very, very busy after the release of Vector. You had the headlining tour and then the tour with Devin Townsend. When exactly did you have the time to compose a new album and like get it ready and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the story of these two records really, like when we started putting the idea together at the back end of 2017, early 2018, kind of. And we started off with this idea that album 5, represented by the Roman numeral V, Vector, and the album 6 would be VI, Virus, and that's how these two records would be connected. We wanted to go forward with the heavier direction. That was always the intention as well. And there was a lot of demo material thrown around, beginning of 2018 for both records. Actually, we were demoing with both albums in mind, and there were certain pieces that were kind of developing faster than others, and that became Vector, and some other like really strong material, but we kept it on the shelf, as it were, with some of the plans we had for the follow-up album. So. So really, it was development of that, and obviously, as you say, we got caught up with a lot of touring and promoting Vector, and always on the back of our mind that the next album would drop a year later. But it took a little bit longer because of our commitments, and we found ourselves on the Devin Townsend tour in Europe with an unfinished album, which was to be released later than we had planned. But we focused on all the downtime that we had on that tour to really bring that album to the finish line. And yeah, that's pretty much how it all came together.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you about that because today I decided to listen to Vector first and then straight to Virus, and I noticed that it kind of flows nicely into one another as well. So that becomes kind of one big album. Was that kind of intentional, or did you not think about that when you chose Prosthetic to be the first song?
Yeah, absolutely intentional in terms of the flow of the music, the story, the overarching storyline that covers both records, and also with like production elements and like keeping the same team involved with the production and the artwork. And how we recorded things, So yeah, we wanted the two pieces to be consistent and distinctively companion pieces.
So thematically, of course, the albums also fit together. Was it always for you to plan to write a second part of the story, and why did you keep that quiet when you released Vector?
So the whole point of these two records is a concept album, or albums really, which explores the legacy of the Cockroach King. And so this is like a song from The Mountain, our 2013 album, which is it kind of became like a fan favorite, or definitely a live favorite. It was the song that kind of brought us into the fray in a way, like. We were chipping away with the first two records, but when that song dropped, it caught a lot of people's attention. So we have a lot of love for that song in particular. It made us who we are in some ways. And we wanted to have fun with this idea of the Cockroach King being an actual being, because the original meaning of the song, the Cockroach King, was largely shrouded in metaphor, and it pertained to capitalism, American dream, that kind of concept. And we thought it'd be fun to just make this Cockroach King an actual being, a creature, a sort of Kafka style, half man, half insect. So with Vector, we thought we'd make that the origin story and kind of delve into this character's mind and his backstory of his a descent to madness is in a way. And but we kept things kind of subtle, and some people picked up on a lot of the Cockroach King clues and the lyrics and some of the melodic references. And so we kept quiet, but that was kind of fun for us, and we knew what was to come as well. So and obviously with this record, we take it further, and it's less about his origin and more about his development into, I guess, politics and being this tyrannical leader and his effect on humanity. So that was the idea of his journey.
Like, listening to the album and the fact that the album is called Virus, of course, it like there is like a little bit a link to the state of the world now, even if it was not intentional and you didn't write it at the time that there was a pandemic. But I was wondering, like, this made me kind of wonder what your whole like thoughts are about the current situation of the world. Do you think that everything was meant to happen like this, or do you have any kind of opinion about the matter?
Well, first of all, obviously, the synchronicity of this record coming out now is, the irony is not lost on us. And it's quite an amazing thing, actually, that things have unraveled the way they have in conjunction with what we're doing. On a deeper level with regards to what's happening in the world, well, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I feel like it's nature kind of fighting for its existence in some ways. And there's actually a little bit of a reference to that on Virus, because at the time we were writing, Extinction Rebellion was a big thing, and that was a large issue, and we were looking at how humans were treating planet Earth. And so that this is particularly prevalent on the song Carousel. So that was a topic we talk about, and Virus really is a kind of a metaphor for these kind of other negative things that are happening in our world, So yeah, I think like nature's kind of fighting for its survival. It's given human beings the chance to take a pause and rethink, our purpose on this earth, and how we behave and how we treat the earth and how we treat each other. So I think, like, obviously there's a lot of fatalities, and it's a big tragedy. It's a lot of death, and it's very sad. But I think with every yin there's a yang, and there's positives to come out of such a negative situation. And I think that's the message that we need to take away from all this.
Well, now that you're basically living through an actual pandemic and with the virus going on and stuff like that, did you get a new perspective on your actual album, or has it changed at all?
Yeah, in a way. And then actually it was quite scary reading back some of the lyrics. Really, I'd used the idea of virus as a metaphor, as I said, and but yeah, some of the details that I'd put into some of the lyrics there actually scarily ringing quite close to home, and yeah, it's incredible to me. But so I think people after this experience will probably relate to this album more than perhaps was originally intended.
I read somewhere that Vector is also filled with like references to 50s and 60s psychology experiments and stuff like that. Does that mean you guys frequently research these kinds of themes, or like does it all come from like sci-fi, or where do you get the inspiration for these
Yeah,
albums
we
basically?
did a fair bit of research into some of that. We tend to draw a lot of inspiration from cinema. So there were particular movies that we were interested in referencing, like the Kubrick films, like Clockwork Orange and The Shining played a big part in Vector when we were coming up with the story. And with Virus, and also, sorry, the Fly, the David Cronenberg movie, Jeff Goldblum. So that was, yeah, having that link to science fiction and the kind of the pop culture that we enjoy is part of the fun and the connection with it. But yeah, like I said, there was some reading into some of the psychology and the history of that concept as well.
Well, you mentioned movies just now, and what I think is that, well, the both albums kind of very much, well, in the past you compared Factor to a rock opera as well, and it kind of very much feels like a soundtrack to me, also because there are certain motives like returning. Um, is that something you maybe one day would be interested in, to have this kind of Factor and Virus or Cockroach King movie out there with songs as like inspiration?
Should be super cool, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been the case with Aquarius and Visions as well. That when we're putting lyrics together for these things, and the music, of course, as well. But we're thinking quite visually, which might interest some people. It's not just about music for us. We're putting imagery to what we're writing. So yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because that's very much where we come from as writers. So putting the ideas together for this album and previous albums, definitely had this cinematic vision in mind, like particularly for Aquarius. Actually, like I imagined that could be a period drama of some sort, stroke sci-fi. So yeah, I would love to see something like that made in the future, and yeah, hopefully it will.
Do you think that kind of vision comes from the fact that you're also like a photographer, so like busy with, visual images and stuff like that?
Yeah, possibly, but I think all of us are just massive film buffs and huge fans of cinema, so I think we all kind of think like that. We're all on the same page in that respect.
Is the story concluded with this release, or might there be some more albums to discover for the fans, or you don't want to really react on that maybe?
No, I mean, in terms of the story of the Cockroach King, it ends pretty badly for this character. So I would say his story is over. But something that we're quite interested in is like looking beyond just the one story and creating this almost like this universe, extended universe for Haken and the albums, and I would, I promote the idea that they are all interlinked in some way. So it's not the end for this universe. Put it that way.
Now, if we dive a little bit more into the sound, you already mentioned that the albums were more orienting towards a progressive metal way, but also in this album, I feel personally it's a little bit darker, maybe also because of the theme, and it also includes like your heaviest song so far, in my opinion, Prosthetic. How do you feel the sound has progressed on this album, and are there some more surprises maybe for the fans they can look forward to?
I think, like, as huge fans of heavy metal, like essentially we are a prog rock band, but there's always been this strand of dark extreme metal in our music, and that just comes from the fact that we're huge fans of bands like Fear Factory and Meshuggah and Gojira and the likes of that ilk. And I think we got to a point where we found ourselves always falling into the proggier side of prog metal, if that makes sense. And we really, I think, consciously wanted to make two harder hitting albums. and I think we achieved that. Like it was certainly very consistent with Vector, I feel, and I'm glad that we did. But we kind of pulled back a little bit on Virus and expanded that to the other genres that we are known for and we enjoy, putting new flavors in there as well. So yeah, it's definitely like consistent in its heaviness, and we wanted to make the heavier parts heavier, if that makes sense. Push the boundaries of the heavy and also expand on the other aspects as well, just basically improving all areas. And and I feel that's what we've done. Yeah.
Did the writing process in that sense also change a little bit with these two new albums?
Yeah, well, Vector was pretty much business as usual. Like I said, we were together a lot in the beginning, putting some demo ideas together. Sometimes that would take place in like groups of 2 or 3. It wouldn't necessarily be the whole band, but there were certainly some ideas fleshed around at the beginning, at the start. The process that's been the way for the last 2 or 3 records, I would say, has been largely around like file sharing online. We do our individual work, share what we have, goes back and forth like that. Eventually we arrive at things that the majority are happy with, and we sign it off. But this time around was slightly different. It started off that way, but like I said, when we got together on the tour in Europe back end of last year, we found ourselves with a lot more work to do on the album than we thought we had. So we converted the tour bus into like a makeshift studio, and we spent all our downtime on that tour really focusing on that record, on the writing and ensuring the compositions were great, all the vocal melodies were on point, and so yeah, that was a very rewarding time that we were all together bouncing ideas off each other and arriving at decisions a lot quicker than we would have normally. So I felt that really benefited the record being in that same space.
Do you think like writing together in the same space, and especially on tour, does it also inspire you that, you're in this kind of bubble, sort of say?
Yeah, I think like there's a creative flow that happens when human beings are in the same room, bouncing things off each other. We kind of jokingly called that studio the vibe, because quite often we were getting into this kind of vibe of creativity, and so yeah, that's I agree with that statement, definitely.
Is that something you might use for future releases as well? If you can even recreate that outside of a tour bus, I don't know.
Yeah, ideally. I think it's always important to come to these sessions with some sort of material. So I think the individual element is important as well. It's not like we're Nirvana and we're bouncing around 3 chords and coming up with a punk song. This stuff's quite complicated, complex. So it's important to have a sort of rough idea of what you're working on to start with. But I certainly agree in ironing out the details and fleshing out some of the sections that we've come up with benefits from that time together, and hope we'll either do it the same way on a tour again, or we'll hire a room somewhere and sort of make it a vacation and write an album. That would be nice. We'll see.
How do you guys usually go about the songs? Do you start with the lyrics, or do you start with like a melody line of some kind? And how did you also end up adding these like certain motives from different songs throughout the album? Do they come naturally, or?
Some of it comes naturally. Some of it's preordained. Maybe that's not the word. Like planned. It's a funny process, because you have the starting point where you're mapping out, in a way, like you have no idea what the music's going to be, but you're mapping out perhaps a concept or what you want the themes to be in the songs. So that's the starting point, and that starts to, I guess, influence what kind of sounds you might create when you're writing the music. Although at that stage, demoing ideas for songs can be a very separate thing. So it gets to a point where you start to marry things together. So I might keep in mind the themes that we want to write about, but then just start writing lyrics in a phonetic way, and seeing what sounds nice, and start kind of letting some words settle on the phrases, and that's when you start linking the two. So yeah, in an ideal world, those things kind of go together in tandem, but sometimes music can overtake and the lyrics come later, and vice versa. So yeah, it's just about keeping on the ball with all the elements and finding that glue that makes them all fit at some point.
You guys also recently started a Twitch channel, I noticed, and these kinds of new streaming platforms have kind of been overtaken by metal bands, especially to connect with the fans. Who came up with that idea, and like what sorts of content can fans expect in the future?
Yeah, some of us have been more involved in that than others. For example, I took a bit of a backseat with some of that. I've joined a couple of times in talking about some of the musical elements. But yeah, I think it was kind of a unanimous decision to get involved and do something with this time while we're not doing anything. And engage with the fans, because the truth is we were supposed to be on the road touring and performing and meeting our fans, and that just sort of fell on its head. So yeah, this was a cool way to kind of re-engage and work in unison with promoting the record as well. So the content wise, I think so far we've discussed the sort of the process of writing the singles that we've released. So that's from the kind of the conception and to the lyrics to the music video aspect, and we've also been kind of previewing some of the unheard demo material as well, which is kind of cool. And for us as well, like we haven't heard that stuff in a while. I was kind of looking back at our own processes and reanalyzing it. So it's kind of fun. There's been some question and answer sessions. There's been some quiz nights, I believe. I haven't been involved in those, but I get lots of, and we're thinking of new ideas for that Twitch channel as well. So watch this space.
Yeah, a lot of bands are coming up with these kinds of alternatives, and streaming concerts are now also like a really popular thing. Is that something we can expect from Haken, or is it a little bit complicated with the situation right now?
It's a bit complicated, and plus we're all very spread out, so any kind of concerts would tend to be the split screen things anyway. So but we'll see what happens in due course, because I don't think we're going to be out of murky waters anytime soon. So there might be some restrictions lifted, but yeah, I think that this format in online music performing is going to be here for the foreseeable future, I think. So yeah, maybe we'll do something like as a split screen, but we'll see.
What do you think of these alternatives? Because I can imagine it must be really difficult as an artist to not being able to do what you kind of want to do most, which is performing, probably, I guess, for you as well.
Yeah, it really sucks because, we had a whole summer of festivals planned. We had plans for later in the year, which I think are going to be, they've been on standby, but I think 2020 is pretty much a write-off. So it's really frustrating. For me personally, I've been reconnecting with my guitar, and I've been the singer in Haken, but my main instrument was guitar when I got into music. And that's kind of been hung up on the wall for the last 10 years in a way. So this time for me has been spent kind of just getting my chops back up to speed and like having a connection with my guitar and songwriting again, like from that perspective. And so I've been writing some songs for myself in this time. Luckily for us, we have the album to promote, so that's keeping us busy. if not, we probably would have been, writing. So yeah, but that's, I'm sure, in we're kind of unable to keep still as our personalities are. So I'm sure there'll be new material kind of being drummed up at some point very soon. We'll see.
All right, I think that's it for my questions. Thank you so much for doing this interview. Do you have any last thoughts you want to share with the fans or people watching this video?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we hope you enjoy the record. We hope you enjoy filling in all the gaps that might have been missing from Vector, and you get the full picture now. Obviously, June the 5th can't come soon enough. Thank you for your support during these times. I know some of you have donated actually money to us because we lost a lot of money on that tour that got cancelled and kind of crippled us actually. So we really appreciate any support for the band, even if it's buying T-shirts. So yeah, we wouldn't be here without the fans. So it means a lot to us. So yeah, we'll keep doing what we're doing, and we hope you keep listening.